So much for being here, John.
Thank you. Thank you.
John is what we call a serial techonomist, and somebody who has actually been an advisor to me and to the company since we created it 9 years ago, and even when I was struggling with recreating it after I failed the first time. So thank you, John, for that. John is CEO of BlackBerry and executive chairman of their board, and he basically has turned BlackBerry around and turned it into a completely different kind of company, because it just couldn't be the other kind of company anymore. So before that, he ran Sybase very effectively, made it very global, huge China involvement, sold it to Oracle.
SAP.
SAP, oh, sorry, Jesus. I do that kind of thing. Anyway, so what are you working on now? Why is BlackBerry now a security and IoT and auto company instead of a handset company?
Yeah, I realized most of you in the room has been a BlackBerry user, am I right? Some point in your life.
Let's see a hand. Who has used a BlackBerry?
Right.
Yeah, like that's 90%.
So I only concluded two things. Number one, you folks are quite old, just like me. And number two, unfortunately, I don't ask the next question, which will embarrass myself. You know, like say, keep the hands up if you're still using a BlackBerry, and then all the hands came down. So that tells you a lot about. You know, if you bear with me, I think I had a video, right? Did we have a video? Are you going to play that?
Do we have a video, Sean? Yet? No, we don't have a video.
Okay, then forget it. There's a little joke in there. I just want to show you the joke. Okay, all serious aside, I joined the company 6 years ago. And, you know, when I look at a company, it's really about risk versus reward. It's not about whether it could be a cell phone company continuously. You know, the BlackBerry's been around for 30 years. If you folks all remember, it started as a company called RIM, Research in Motion. And the claim to fame at the time are pagers. Everybody had these pagers on your belt, running around. And so it turns into a kind of a mobile data enablement tool for especially for business users. So when I came in, I looked at this thing, and then I thought that the whole hardware phone business, especially, I have to tell you the story. You have to stop me, by the way. I have a tendency of
if you digress, I'll.
Okay. So I went to one of the things I did when I first joined. I was emotionally and romantically still engaged with phones myself. I said, is there something that we could do to turn around the phone business? I know it's difficult. So I went to visit a lot of people, the vendors and manufacturers. One of the companies that I visited was Xiaomi at the time, 6 years ago in China. Lei Jing and I sat down, and he was showing me now is a pretty normal phone that is called a Redmi, you know. And so he showed me the phone. And then, so I was a pretty nicely put together phone, good quality. And I asked the question, I said, how much does this phone retail for? He said, $299. Then I did my mental calculations. I cannot build a phone at a cost equal to $299. You know, it costs him more money to build that phone, and then a distribution on a global basis. All right. Anyway, so I decided to start in new thinking. I came from a lot of software business, so I liked the software margin. I like the recurringness of this, and then I wanted to tie that to what BlackBerry is always known for. So enterprise communications, security, what we're known for. We have technology behind it, a patent portfolio behind it, and all that. So decided to take the company that direction. So 6 years have gone by. We're going to do over $1 billion, some in revenue or in security software this year.
Wow.
There's zero hardware revenue.
Security is the key.
Security is the key. That's why we're big in banks and governments, healthcare.
And I want you to talk about the architecture of the security, but the reason you can go into security is because BlackBerries, among all phones, were always the most secure. So you've taken that DNA and that architecture and applied it elsewhere. Is that a fair statement?
Exactly. Yeah. So basically, instead of having those security, and by the way, it's infrastructure supported by probably one of the most sophisticated NOCs for people in technology, a network operating center. It ties about 600 operators around the world routing all the T1 lines. redundancy and all that good stuff. So we own a company like cryptology company where we inject cryptology code into every Qualcomm chip that I ever built, and so forth. So what we have decided to do is those things are usually all apply to a BlackBerry phone. Where there's a 9900 that most of you probably use, is called the Bold, and then the Storms, and there's a lot of different. Anyway, so when I came in, I made it. I said that use all that technology for everybody. So all of a sudden now we have a huge base in iOS and iPhone, iPad, Android. List goes on.
So, but talk about some of the things you're doing, for example, in autos.
So this is before I came to the company. The founder bought a embedded operating system company. Again, pardon me for being. It's using something called a microkernel technology. The only thing about microkernel technology is the safest technology because you have the least amount of attack surface. And that's it. So the next thing he did was he turned that operating system into a phone architecture. And I don't know how many people have heard a phone that by BlackBerry called BP10 operating system. And that's the basics of that operating system. When I came in, the company decided.
Get to the cars now, because you told me to keep you on track.
Right. So that originally was a phone operating system, the operating system we bought from Harman. And Harman, of course, is one of the bigger tier one in the auto industry. So we bought that and we distributed around the world. And so I want them to go back in the car. So since then, we built solution on safety and over-the-airs and clusters, and in addition to infotainment. Today, you might not know that 160 million cars running around the world. There's about 1 billion cars around the world on the road today. 160 million of them using BlackBerry.
Well, QNX was there when you got there, though,
yes,
right?
that's what that's the product.
Yeah, QNX is a huge factor in auto technology.
160 million
right.
cars.
And you've just made it better and better. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about architecture, and then I want to talk to you about global economy and China. But I know a lot of the security that you're thinking about has to do with, we heard yesterday John Chambers and others talking about the edge. Ericsson mentioned it. This is really a new landscape for computing generally, and you're playing a big role in that. So talk about that.
Well, so we still focus on security. We obviously agree with the edge computing. This is the only way.
Security for the edge.
Yeah, it's the only way to. So we're going to focus on security and edge. And two things that we've done. We created a product that based on something called the zero trust architecture. This is the buzzword. And we apply a lot of those technology that we know of in identity management and continuous authentication and all that. Push it all the way to the edge. Right? So that's number one. Number two that we have done is we bought a company called Cylance. Most recently, I don't know how many people heard of Cylance. It's one of the AI company, a machine learning company that build data model for anti-threats, AV. So they call themselves second generations of Symantec and McAfee, and it's one of those unicorns. We pay about $1.4 billion for that company, and we're integrating all that technology back into both the server side as anything on the edge and all the IoT devices.
So you'll be a big player in security at the edge.
We certainly hope so.
Yeah. So you're so involved with cars, and you're clearly aware of what's happening with software. How soon are we going to have truly autonomous cars?
I think this is going to, I'm one of the more pessimistic. If you talk to BMW or, I hope nobody's here from BMW, but you talk to BMW or some of the other auto manufacturers around the world, Honda being one of them, they think this is a 2023 to 2025 phenomena. And you talk to Tesla, they would think it's already here.
Yeah, right. If you don't mind a few crashes, but go on. Yeah.
Right. And they're not. So the issue is not so much as technology. Maybe cost of technology, but that curve come down really steep. The LiDAR, radar technology is getting better and more condensed and all that pretty steep. Number one issue, government policy. The worst government policy, unfortunately, the most confusing government policy today is actually the United States.
Right, but bottom line, are we going to have autonomous cars
We
by
will.
2025?
Oh, no, we're not going to. Maybe a few of them running around on the fringe, yeah. But we're not going to, you and I are not going to get into, go to a dealer and buy an autonomous driven car. Or they think that we're going to lease, rent it, or they don't even never own it.
When would you think they could be ubiquitous?
Ubiquitous?
Yeah.
Oh. 15 years is probably an optimistic view. Here's the reason why. I have some logic behind it. Okay, car cycle is 10 years. 100 million cars get produced every year, 1.1 billion cars on the road today. Okay, everybody who doesn't, when an autonomous vehicle comes out, there is a lot of us will be somewhat skeptical. Oh, by the way, you have a reasonably new car, you're not going to change it. So you're going to have that hybrid approach. The freeway infrastructure, the over-the-air, and the V2X technology are starting to be there, but not entirely ubiquitous. There are competing standards in vehicle-to-vehicle and infrastructure communications, even in the United States, not to talk about beyond the world. So there's a lot to sort out. They're driven by policy, by liability. It's not
Public acceptance.
public acceptance. So I say, when it's here, let's say it takes about 3 to 5 years for us to all feel comfortable. And there's somewhat of a mandate out there for what the definition of safety is, which is another big topic. And then after that, the normal auto replacement cycle comes in. It's going to take 10 years, maybe 8. So I think optimistically, we're looking 15 years out.
Could be a lot longer. Yeah. So you were born and raised in Hong Kong. You just heard, I hope you heard what Martin just said about U.S.-China. You've always been a real, very deeply involved in U.S.-Chinese relations. You were head of the Committee of 100, which is Chinese Americans who are very much involved in, I don't know if that organization has the same influence it did when you ran it. How do you see that relationship now? And China's role generally?
Well, that's a very complicated question. So, so I think both sides in the last 3 years have miscalculated the other side. We will have a trade deal. We have to. There is no choice. Both are dependent on each other, and the global economy is depending on the two. So, now it's about jockeying, going back and forth. The Chinese time horizons, 3 to 5 years is short term. Our time horizons, according to the current political environment, is less than a year. So they want to strike a deal in less than a year. And so that would just happen. I don't really get too worried about whether we pay 5% too much on certain import or they pay 5% too much on certain export. I think it's all going to wash itself out. And both sides, the economy is hurting a little bit because of this. But again, I think it's short-term. I think the longer term is a more interesting thing. We got to find a way to become a competitor and a collaborator at the same time. And all the technology that we talk about, rumor has it they're working on 6G, which is definition, 5G. In our world, I don't even know that some of the county and the city have banned 5G or they haven't accepted 5G yet.
Yeah, where you live, they banned 5G.
I know. I mean, I live in Denville, California, which is not far from where. The city council has voted that they will not allow 5G installations.
And what does that even mean?
I don't know what it means. I mean, I guess one of these days, 5 years from today, you walk into that thing, into my town, your cell phone won't work. I guess. It has to mean that. It's so silly, it doesn't even make sense.
But how does that connect to what you were saying about China?
Yeah, so I think China from AI and telecommunications and all those are making big bets and advancement. And I know you interviewed Kai-Fu Lee before, you just wrote another book. And, the China thing about, the biggest problem they have is they broadcast this thing about 2025 Made in China plan. That was a big thing that woke up a lot of the foreigners, especially Americans. But at the end of the day, we have to collaborate. We can't separate.
What do you think about what Martin said, that the big problem is the U.S. won't accept that China is regaining its role as the dominant economy?
Yeah, U.S., we have one problem that I always think. We always have to be the leader. And when we always tell people what to do, 5, 10 years ago, when David said, I was extremely involved with policy. I was on the President 43 Export Council. We did a lot of work. Anyway, the point is, we always go there and preach to them what we believe is an acceptable norm. We want to, you probably have read this, we want to put them into their involvement to the international community and give into the international rules and stuff. Well, guess what? They did. They created AIIB and then created a One Belt, One Road, and then we didn't want to join it. And then now we complain about them using money as an influence.
And we shot ourselves in the foot with TPP also.
Oh yeah, that too. That's a different issue. But if you look at what we did as a country after World War II with Europe, we did exactly what they're doing it today. I mean, somehow we always like to preach other people to do it the way that we see is the right way. And when they do well, we don't like it.
Yeah.
And this is what is happening, and then, anyway.
Okay, I want to hear from anybody in the audience who's got a question for this guy, who's one of the most sage analysts of the global economy and business and what's happening with wireless. Anybody have anything? No? Oh, shocked into submission? Okay, here, John.
Hi, John Kao. I'm just curious, given the amazing story of the transformation of BlackBerry, whether you have any insights you could share with us about what you did both as a leader and as a manager
yes, thank
to
you.
make it all
that's
happen.
a question I should have asked.
As a leader and a...
I'm differentiating a little bit the
Yeah,
role
how
of
did you
leader
save BlackBerry?
and manager.
What did you do?
You can mash them up if you want.
Well...
yeah, we thought it was going to go away.
Yeah, I thought so too. I didn't really want an iconic company go away. I was looking for some challenge. I sold Sybase to SAP, not Oracle.
I know.
But SAP. And then I stayed for a couple of years to help integrate it, and then I moved on to Silver Lake for a year. There were a number of opportunities in running public company, and that's something that I was no longer interested in the sense that, been there, done that. If the company is doing well, don't really need somebody like myself. But anyway, so this opopportunity came around.
Yeah, because you turned around Sybase too.
Yeah, and this opportunity, I mean, I'm the one masochistic. It's my middle name. And so, but I thought I want to do something that most people think cannot be done. And I look at this company that is losing market share rapidly and losing $1 billion. The quarter I went in, we lost $1 billion that quarter. That not too many companies could handle $1 billion loss on a quarterly basis. And so, and I saw a lot of good technology. I grew up with BlackBerry myself, although I was not involved in any way, shape, or form with the company. And so started to look for what could be a chapter 2. Again, I always tell my people, say, this is like it's a very simple meeting. Strategy, I think, is very simple. You sit down, you get a piece of paper out, just like me writing resume. You write down everything that you know how to do, and you write down what you believe the other people will pay for, will pay with the money for you, and then you just match up the list. And then we believe security on the edge, the IoT, on all devices. What's the right strategy? So we start building that strategy. The hardest part is the cultural thing. The hardest part is to convince 6,000 people to follow. They used to do phones, and I have like 10 and 12 phones going on developed around the world at the same time. They used to do phones, and now I'm asking them to do something a lot different. So a lot of people quit. We lost a lot of great people because they just don't believe it, and it's out of their comfort zone. And so there's a lot of, and then so through that process, hiring people, acquiring companies, so they are acquiring not only the mindset, but not only the skills, but actually the way of doing business in software. And integrating them. And that's the other thing. Once you bought a company, they all want to go kind of semi-independent. you have to be able to put them together into a coherent strategy. A lot of those work, kind of blocking and tackling, so it's a long-term game.
Unfortunately, John, we ran out of time, but I'll tell you, I love having you up here, and I hope we can have you again soon.
Thank you.
And thank you for all the